So without further ado tonight, I would really like to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Mimi Israël. She's chair of our Department of Psychiatry, so she's also my boss. She's psychiatrist in chief at the Douglas Institute. She's attending psychiatrist at the Douglas Eating Disorders Program. She's president of the Association of Chiefs of Department of Psychiatry. She has a very nice CV. She's also a very active researcher, clinician, and teacher. And we're very happy to have her again for her third Mini Psych-School, Dr. Mimi Israël.
Thank you, Anne, and good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here at my third Mini Psych, but it's the first time that I have to stand like this without something hiding my body. So this isn't easy. I have to admit, even though I spent at least a week preparing this talk and trying to think about what I wanted to tell you tonight. So in this talk, I'm going to discuss how body image dissatisfaction is growing in our society and how for now it affects women and girls more than men. I'll show you how body image dissatisfaction leads to unhealthy behaviors and affects mental health. And finally, I'm going to talk about prevention and whether there's anything we can do to change that. So I'll start with homework, because after all, this is class, right? So it's very challenging to give a talk about body image without images. They didn't let me have a PowerPoint, so I'm going to have to ask you to look things up throughout this course. I'm sure you all have access to the internet, so when I say look this up. You can I'll give you some little tips on how to Google for the things I'll be talking about. I'm going to start with a self-test. Again, it's a course, so first test. How many people in this room have ever been on a diet? Raise your hand. What I expected. This is great. Okay. How many people in this room have never been on a diet? Brave ones? Good. So, in case you want to see it from my angle, it looks like almost everyone in this room has been on a diet. Now, of the men in this room, I hate to put you on the spot, how many of you guys have been on a diet? I told you they're catching up. Okay, well, if I'd asked this question 100 years ago when Douglas Hall was built, would I have had such a rousing chorus? I actually thought of telling you to stand up so I'd get a standing ovation right away, but I prefer to earn them, so I'm saving that one. What about 50 years ago? Would we have had so many people in this room on a diet? Good question. So let's talk about it. But some more questions for my self-test. How good are you at estimating your body size and shape? Are there days when you feel enormous, but no one seems to have noticed that you changed? How satisfied are you with your body? Do you like it? Hate it? Love it? Never think about it? Anyone ever think about their body? Good. How do you behave towards your body? Do you avoid mirrors? Or like every chance you get, you look? Do you ignore your body? Do you hide it or do you flaunt it? How much time, money, energy do you spend trying to hide or change your body shape and size? Of course, you don't have to write this down. I just want you to think about it. The other question is, how much importance do you place on your physical appearance? And how important is your physical appearance in defining your self-worth, what you really think about yourself and how you feel about yourself? Good answer would be very little. My work, school, relationships with friends and family are more important in determining how I feel about myself than my body shape. That's the good answer? Unfortunately, this is not the case for far too many young girls and women. And although men are less vulnerable, I truly believe they're catching up. So, if, for example, 60% of your self-esteem is determined by your weight and appearance, and you hate your body, how good are you going to feel about yourself? Would you agree that appearance is more important to women than to men? Women, you're right. The studies show that women are more likely than men to describe themselves as fat, to weigh themselves often, and to diet frequently. They're generally also more dissatisfied with their physical appearance than are men. But if you take a look back, it's clear that the ideal look has changed over time. So how you should look depends on when you were born. It's also interesting to reflect on how the word gets around. I mean, cave women did not have magazines, right? So how'd they know how they should look? Take a look back now 100 years. Thin was not in. If you have internet access, you can start looking things up like bathing beauties in the 20s. By today's standards, these girls would have been plump. You can also trace the evolution of Miss America, fashion models, and movie stars across the last 100 years. You'll notice they're shrinking. The first Miss America was held in 1921, and this girl would have never won today. And yes, Marilyn Monroe wore size 14. You all knew that, right? So since dolls are important to little girls, find out what dolls looked like before the 50s. Anybody remember the year that Barbie was introduced? Yeah? 59. That's the year. And you may also want to Google, is a Barbie body possible? You realize that a real woman with Barbie's body, her head would fall off. She'd have to have half a liver. It's a good website. Also look to see a contrast between Barbie and your average 19-year-old woman. Finally, there's a great website called Adios Barbie. It's got great blogs on it, and you can figure out what's on it. So when there was no TV, no phones, no magazines, no internet, no smartphones, no tablets, how did women learn about what was attractive and figure out how they should look? Let me tell you a story. It takes place in Fiji, where television was only introduced in 1995. Anne Becker, a psychiatrist with training in anthropology, decided to study the impact of the introduction of television on adolescent girls. In Fiji, you've gained weight is a traditional compliment. A nicely rounded body is the norm for men and for women. Skinny legs is a major insult. And going thin is the Fijian term for losing an incredible amount of weight, and is considered worrisome, as it should be in our society too. So Anne Becker started by surveying a group of Fijian high school girls in 1995 to see where they were at in terms of body, shape, and weight preoccupation. Then she went back 3 years later and studied another group who were the same age as the first girls she had looked at. And what she was asking herself is, did introducing TV make a difference? What she found was that just a few years after the introduction of television, things had changed for these young girls. Girls who said they watched TV 3 or more times a week in 1998 were 50% more likely to describe themselves as too big or fat, and 30% more likely to go on a diet than girls who didn't watch TV very much. Before 1995, in fact, no one had heard of the word diet in Fiji. People never heard of calories. It was a totally foreign concept. In fact, the whole traditional culture in Fiji is about feeding people till they can't move. Okay? That's what a good host is. In 1998, 69% of the girls surveyed said that at some time they had been on a diet. 83% of the girls interviewed responded that they felt television had specifically influenced their friends and or themselves to feel differently about or to want to change their body shape or weight. And 77% reported that television had influenced their own body image. Students told the research group that they wanted to look like the Western women they saw on television shows like Beverly Hills 90210. You know what those girls look like. And not like their mothers and aunts. Because traditionally, that is how women got their idea of what they should look like, from their community, from the other women around them. So now they were getting different images that did not correspond to the way their mothers and grandmothers looked. Girls said things like, I want their body and I want their size. So in order to be like them, I have to work on myself. I have to exercise and my eating habits have to change. Worse still, watching TV not only generated body image dissatisfaction, but also put the girls at risk of developing eating disorders. 11.3%, pretty precise figure, in the 1998 survey said they had induced vomiting to control their weight. This is in contrast to 0% 3 years later. So eating disorders, in fact, didn't really exist in Fiji yet before that time. And when they were given eating disorders attitude tests and scales that test whether people have symptoms of eating disorders, 29% scored high on these tests and scored as being at risk, whereas 3 years before, only 13%. I think the Fijian story is a powerful example of what the exposure to a thin ideal can do to adolescent girls. So what is this thin ideal? Well, the average American woman is 5'4" and weighs 140 pounds. The average American model is 5'11" and weighs 117 pounds. So the way we figure, there's 3 billion women on the planet and maybe 8 supermodels. But why is it then that most women ascribe to wanting to look like that? So only 2 to 5% of North American women have the prototypical perfect body, which if you look behind the scenes and the photoshopping and the cosmetic surgery and all the touch-ups, is really an emaciated person with breast implants, okay? So, but nonetheless, 2 to 5% of American women find a way of looking like that. That leaves 98% not looking like that and being unhappy. So a lot of young women and men, some, but we're not going to talk about men until later, but a lot of young girls and women aspire to attain this thin ideal. And the problem really arises when you internalize this thin ideal. In other words, you say, this is what I should look like. And this message is constantly being reinforced. We are constantly being told, this is what you should look like. And some people say, yeah, this is what I should look like. Magazines portray and compare happiness to being thin, leading people to feel that if they're not thin, they're not happy. An unacceptably large proportion of women of all ages hold unrealistic ideals of body shape and size. Ideals that can actually be both physically and emotionally harmful. Because our society emphasizes a woman's body as the measure of her value. And we're still there, even after women's liberation. So if what you earn is an indication of what you're worth, let's have a look at women's earning power today. So in 2012, the US Census Bureau reported that women still earn 77 cents for every dollar earned by a man. Except for one profession. Can you guess the career path where women wildly outperform men financially? Any guesses? Exactly. So 1 month ago, Forbes magazine reported that the year's highest paid male model, his name happens to be Sean O'Prine, and he's not bad looking, made $1.5 million between September 2012 and September 2013. Now, the best paid women model in the same period, and that's Gisele Bundchen. You've heard of her, you know what she looks like. And by the way, she's too thin. I checked. She earned $42 million. That's 27 times more than poor Sean. Forbes adds that if you take together the 10 top earning male models and you compare them to the 10 top earning female models, the difference is 8 million for guys compared to 83 million for women. So if you do the math, male models earn 3.6 cents to a dollar. Remember the 77 cents to a dollar? So, but the thin ideal is not just the problem. It's not enough. If you think about the female ideal in today's society, in addition to being slim, youthful, no matter how old she is, she's fit, energetic. She's in fact what I would consider a superwoman. She's a mother, runs a company, runs a marathon, has loads of great friends, hosts dinner parties and board meetings, and cooks gourmet meals that of course she can't eat because she's on a diet. So do you all agree with this image of the superwoman? No? Yeah? You want to add anything? Miss something? So how come we all agree on this? Where did we all get this idea that that is what a superwoman should be like? Instead, what most of the women in this room and that you hang out with are really like? Good question. So get ready for some media bashing. TV, magazines, the internet, smartphones, and social media are great vehicles for communicating society's ideals. In support, in fact, several studies demonstrate a link between fashion magazine or television consumption and body dissatisfaction and disordered eating. So how hard do I have to work on you to convince you that we are bombarded daily by images of superwomen? Not hard? Should I keep going? Yeah. And that the thin ideal is persistently being promoted despite protests. We say, come on, give us a break. Real women don't look like that. But then you open up your internet and there she is. You go by a billboard and there she is. So to recap, this thin ideal is our current sociocultural standard of female beauty. This standard is intensely reinforced and propagated via the media, leading to widespread internalization of the thin ideal. This is what I should look like. The majority of women do not fit this standard, hence generating body image dissatisfaction in an unacceptably large number of women. Have I convinced you? Okay. So, what is the impact of internalizing a body image ideal that's impossible to attain or almost impossible to attain without surgery and implants and going on a big diet? Well, to start, bless you, the result is lots of unhappy women who think negative thoughts about their body image each day or who hate their body. I read a survey that was done recently. Do you want to guess how many negative thoughts an average woman thinks about her body a day? Let's say more than 5, less than 5, more than 5, 13. Negative thoughts about your body each day. Studies show that 56% of women who are at a healthy weight, according to the regular charts, want to lose weight. The result also, though, is anxious little kids who are afraid of getting fat. More than 80% of 10-year-old girls are worried that they're fat. The result is unhappy teenagers. 34% of teenage boys and over 40% of teenage girls in high school are unhappy with their body image and say they want to change their appearance. And the result is lower self-esteem, which puts some girls and women at higher risk of developing depression and other mental health problems. The result is a higher risk of adopting unhealthy behaviors to control weight and shape for some, and a higher risk of developing eating disorders for others. Finally, and perhaps surprisingly, the result is a higher risk of becoming overweight or even obese. So let's start with self-esteem. Self-esteem refers to your overall evaluation of what you are worth, how you feel about yourself. It's linked to self-confidence and self-respect. Self-esteem affects your relationships, your life path and choices. Self-esteem affects your mental health. So what is the role of body image in the development of self-esteem? Women who internalize the thin ideal, I need to look like that, and whose bodies do not match the thin ideal, remember 95 to 98% of American women, will have lower self-esteem. In order for body image dissatisfaction to impact your self-esteem, you have to place a lot of value on the appearance as a measure of self-worth. If you think your job is more important, or what a good friend you are, what a good mom you are, then maybe how you look today may not be as important. But if your body is the most important, or one of the most important things for you, and you carry it around all day thinking all those negative thoughts, it's going to affect how you feel about yourself. The thin ideal, our society's collective agreement of what women should look like, is everywhere. So you have to fight really hard not to internalize it. That puts many girls and women at risk of not liking themselves, and some girls and women at risk of hating themselves. Twisting things around a little bit, people with low self-esteem can actually also decide to control their weight to improve their self-esteem. You know, maybe if I lose weight and I look like that, people will like me and think I'm worth something. And we see this very often in working with women who've developed eating disorders. So I don't like myself, or maybe I even hate myself, and if I lose weight, I'll like myself better and get other people to respect me and admire me. Wow, you look great. Have you lost weight? Have you heard this? So automatically we're reinforcing the behavior. And if a woman chooses to invest in her appearance to improve her self-worth, she's likely to get into trouble. Because even though advertising leads us to believe that by buying their products and going on their diets we'll lose weight, changing your body is very, very hard to do. Not to mention the fact that the Photoshop ideal doesn't even really correspond to a real body that's easy to get or that really exists in most women. So what kind of trouble can body image dissatisfaction really get people into? When women and girls feel bad about themselves and their bodies, when they feel bad about their bodies, they're more likely to feel bad about themselves. It's hard to feel bad about your body and feel good about yourself, right? So young women exposed to images of idealized models indicated more eating disorder symptoms as well as more negative moods in studies, and stated that they had lower self-esteem. Low self-esteem has been linked to many health compromising behaviors in adolescents, not just eating problems, but substance use, early sexual activity, and suicidality. In adults, it's associated with depression. Low self-esteem also affects performance in work, school, and sports. Let me tell you about a little study. They took girls, adolescent girls, and they had one group put on like a baggy sweater and the other group put on bathing suits. And then they had them do math problems. Guess which group performed better? Bathing suit? Of course not. The girls who wore the baggy sweaters did better. So how we're feeling about our body can really distract us from our best performance. Studies also clearly demonstrate that body image dissatisfaction leads to unhealthy behaviors. Diane Newmark-Steiner, who actually was a speaker here last year, she's a well-known researcher in the field of prevention of eating disorders. And she found that adolescent girls with disturbed eating attitudes identified society's ideal image of the independent, autonomously successful superwoman as their own ideal image. So she did a 5-year study where she tracked kids adolescent kids, lots of them, 2,500 adolescent males and females, and found that at time 1, kids, and especially girls with lower body satisfaction, developed a lot of behaviors when looked at 5 years later. So body satisfaction 5 years later predicted increased dieting, binge eating, increased extreme weight control measures such as taking diet pills, laxatives, diuretics, or even inducing vomiting, and decreased physical activity. And this was found only in the females in the group, not in the males. So even after 5 years, higher levels of body dissatisfaction are associated with more unhealthy behaviors, fasting, skipping meals, and even smoking, and less health-promoting behaviors like good physical activity. In addition to being one of the strongest risk factors for eating disorders, body dissatisfaction was also associated with weight gain over time. Other studies also link media exposure to the thin ideal via magazines or television and lower body satisfaction. For instance, in a survey of 5th to 12th graders, so again adolescents, 47% wanted to lose weight because of magazine pictures, and 69% said that magazine pictures influenced the idea of what they wanted to look like and what a perfect body should look like. So the bottom line is that frequent reading of magazine articles about dieting, weight loss, also strongly predicted unhealthy behaviors in girls, but not in boys. And this is, as I mentioned, after 5 years. Body image dissatisfaction also increases the risk of developing eating disorders. Now, I could have done my whole talk about this, but instead I will refer you, more homework, to a previous Mini Psych in 2011 by Dr. Howard Steiger, where he covered this topic exhaustively. However, I will make a few points. I'll kind of synthesize the information for you. So eating disorders are complex disorders. You know, they're not caused by any specific thing. However, there are lots of factors that put people at risk, and girls are more at risk than boys, of developing eating disorders. Factors such as genetics, developmental factors, certain traumatic events in life, certain personality traits like perfectionism, and lots of neurobiological complicated things that you'll get from Dr. Steiger's lecture. One thing that's very interesting, though, is that if you put all these factors together, they don't predict necessarily, they could predict a lot of problems, not just eating disorders. However, very consistently, the trigger for an eating disorder will be a diet. So people who are at risk or vulnerable because of the combination of genetic, personality, and hormonal factors, when they diet, are more likely to develop an eating disorder, which makes dieting a very dangerous thing to do for some people. And have I just made the point that we are pushed to diet by our society, and that women are more vulnerable to this than men. So now, have I convinced you that a reduction in thin ideal internalization would be a good thing? Yeah? Anyone not sure? Want a few more slides about it? No? That it would result in improved body satisfaction, improved mood, reduced use of unhealthy weight control behaviors, and decreased binge eating and other eating disorder symptoms. Do you buy it? Okay. So ideally then, as a society, what do we want to do? We want to reduce, or better still, get rid of the thin ideal altogether. So there is no risk of it being internalized. Because sure, you can stop it from being internalized. That's really hard. But if it's not there, there's nothing to internalize. So while we're waiting for Vogue magazine to go out of business and the fashion and weight loss industry to shut down, is there anything else that we could do at this point? Can we prevent the internalization of the thin ideal even when it's omnipresent wherever you look? Time for another self-test. How many people in this room have heard of fat talk? Raise your hand. Fat talk. You've heard fat talk, but you don't know it's fat talk. So I'm about to tell you what fat talk is. So fat talk describes all of the statements made in everyday conversation that can contribute to women's dissatisfaction with their bodies by reinforcing the thin ideal standard of beauty. Examples are, I'm so fat. Do I look fat in this? You look great. Have you lost weight? She shouldn't wear that. You're so lucky that you can wear that. So fat talk is not just negative comments. It's also positive comments. You know, good job. You lost weight. How'd you do it? I mean, do I have to tell you about TV shows that are called The Biggest Losers? So, how many of you have ever engaged in fat talk? Try to be honest. Thank you. We all have. Today? Anyone? Thank you. So, it's automatic. I mean, you know, it's hard not to do it because everyone does it. And research shows that exposure to a mere few minutes of fat talk is associated with an increase in body dissatisfaction. So back to the thin ideal home test that I'm giving you. Do you eat family meals together? Yeah? So is there fat talk around your table? Shouldn't eat this. Don't eat too much of that. So what eating behaviors do you model at home? Dieting, low-cal foods, describing high-calorie foods as a reward for good behavior. I was good all week, so I can have a tiny little piece of cheesecake today. Is there fat talk around your house? Can't wear this, it makes me fat. Do I look fat in this? What magazines do you buy? When you surf the web, do you check out those weight loss ads? Tricks and tips like how to lose 10 pounds in a week? 5 foods you must not eat. Has anyone clicked on that one? Why you should never eat bananas, or grandmother reveals secret of how to get rid of belly fat and look young forever. The good news is that there is a lot that can be done, and that there are very interesting strategies being developed, implemented, and tested. Okay, so let me share some examples with you. Clearly, the best place to start is when people are very young. So schools are great places to intervene. There are now healthy body image curriculums being developed and implemented in schools. What these curriculums aim to do is to develop an identity based on inner strengths and not on appearance. To respect genetic diversity of body size and shape. And to develop incentives for healthy eating and healthy lifestyles. Finally, they help kids to think critically about media messages and to resist the unhealthy cultural pressures regarding weight and dieting. Now, similar initiatives have been implemented in university settings, and studies have been carried out to see the impact. The Body Project, which you can also Google, is a program designed to help high school girls and college-age women resist cultural pressures to conform to the thin ideal standard of female beauty and reduce the pursuit of thinness. What the project does, first of all, it was started in sorority, so it's really started by the students themselves. They're kind of given tips on how to do it, but they're left on their own. So the groups are peer-led. There's no professionals telling them what they should think. And they have to come up voluntarily with arguments against thin ideals. So it comes from them. There's no handbook and tells you, what to think. And what they found is that these groups actually resulted in reduction in subscription to the thin ideal, and to consequent decreases in eating disorder risk factors and behaviors. So pretty powerful. So what the intervention involves a series of verbal, written, and behavioral exercises in which the students critique the thin ideal. And so accumulating evidence shows that it works. And in fact, several studies have been done by different groups of researchers, you know, so it's not just one researcher proving that what they do is right. And they found that the Body Project is very effective in eating disorder prevention, thin ideal internalization, and body dissatisfaction and negative mood in the women that do it. And these girls have had flash meetings, and it has a real groundswell popularity in the States right now. Not only that, people who went through the group were found to have less risk of developing eating disorders later on. And their mental health was improved, as were their psychosocial functioning. So it seems to do a lot of good. The other thing, very interesting, is it also reduced the risk of becoming overweight or obese in the girls that followed the program. The other thing, though, that I want to mention is that there are prevention strategies that work, but there are also prevention strategies that don't work. And some of these prevention strategies that don't work are actually still around. Examples are using body image threats to motivate behavior. For instance, if you don't exercise, you'll get fat. You know, right now in the United States, people are so worried about obesity, and there's all these advertisements showing obese kids, telling parents, you're going to outlive your kids. These are not very motivating. And the other thing that is really not useful is teaching kids about eating disorders. It just increases the behaviors if you tell them about it. So the idea of prevention is to develop strengths, not to talk about what could go wrong. A few weeks ago, New York City launched its New York City Girls Project. Also Google it. A public awareness campaign designed to remind girls ages 7 to 12 that self-esteem isn't built by slipping into a pair of designer jeans or cool shoes, and by celebrating what they are inside. So it's really inspiring. There'll be posters all over the city of little girls who are all different from each other, with captions like, I'm a girl, I'm adventurous, friendly, healthy, curious, creative, and brave. Also interesting, though, is the confession of the creator of the project, and I quote, "The day the mayor announced the project, a few television networks asked to interview me to talk about the campaign. I created this campaign, spent more than a year working on it, and cared deeply about it. But I hesitated before agreeing to go on camera. Why? Not because I don't know the issue inside out, or because I'm uncomfortable talking with the media. I hesitated because I felt fat and was unhappy with my hair that day." So here in Quebec, we have our own initiatives. In 2009, Quebec launched the Charter for a Healthy and Diverse Body Image, also known as la Charte québécoise pour une image corporelle saine et diversifiée, or la CHIC for short. La CHIC was the idea of a task force created under the initiative of the Minister of Culture, Communications, and Status of Women, and was co-chaired actually by Howard Steiger from the Douglas. So they brought together in the task force stakeholders from the fashion industry, from government, from healthcare, and they launched this CHIC to combat the negative media influences on body image. So the idea of La Chic was to incite organizations to promote a diversity of body images, including different heights, proportions, and ages. And some of the companies that subscribe to that will now show normal women modeling their clothes instead of the thin ideal modeling their clothes. The charte also aims to encourage healthy eating and weight control habits, to discourage excessive weight control practices or appearance modification, both by the industry and by individuals, to refuse to subscribe to aesthetic ideals based on extreme thinness, to remain vigilant and diligent so as to minimize the risk of anorexia nervosa and bulimia and unhealthy preoccupations with weight, and also to act as agents of change so as to promote healthy eating and weight control practices and realistic body images. La Charte has achieved voluntary engagement of many important Quebec industries and people like you. 35,000 people have signed it to date. And you can Google it, and you can sign it, and I'd like you to sign it. And when you sign it, look up the images of people who have signed it. People write very inspiring messages of who they're signing it for or why they're signing it. 50 years ago, the thought of banning tobacco advertisement was unthinkable, right? I mean, everybody was smoking. Even as evidence accumulated that smoking caused lung cancer, billions were spent on advertising, including specifically targeting kids and women to increase their market. In fact, as early as the 1920s, tobacco advertisement geared towards women included messages such as "reach for a lucky instead of a sweet," to establish an association between smoking and slimness. In fact, the tobacco industry also uses the thin ideal to draw women in and to sell cigarettes. Marketing towards women in the tobacco industry up until recently was basically dominated by images of slim, independent, active women. I call that a 2-for-1. Get them slim and give them lung cancer. So it took a lot of lobbying and a lot of data. But restrictions on tobacco advertising and sales have decreased. Not as much as we want, because they found other ways. But think of the last time you saw an ad for cigarettes or somebody smoking on a billboard. It's been a while. So why not do the same for the thin ideal? There's plenty of evidence that the thin ideal causes harm to people. So what if collective efforts succeeded in banning the advertising of unrealistic women's bodies? If the use of underweight and underage models was forbidden in every country, why not? Creative people are out there trying different strategies to change advertising practices. For instance, last week I came across a petition challenging cultural messages promoting the thin ideal. The originator stated the following: a shopper that can see themselves as beautiful in the clothes they want to buy is a better customer. As fans of H&M, we want to be able to walk into a store and know that our favorite store sees us as the bold, bright, brave young women we are, whose worth and beauty is not determined by what size we wear. We're confident that not only will an introduction of plus-size mannequins better girls' self-esteem, it will also create a stronger, healthier bond between the fashion industry and its legions of followers. Now, has anyone heard of Abercrombie and Fitch? For those, that's the opposite end of the spectrum. They don't want fat people wearing their clothes, so they don't make extra large. But what about you? What can you do? Here are a few tips. First of all, start with yourself. You have to work on accepting your body and appreciating your body as opposed to trying to change it all the time. And help your friends, your kids, and your neighbors to do the same. Fight to decrease the focus on weight and increase the focus on health. And help your friends, kids, and neighbors to do the same. Feel good about yourself rather than your body. And help your friends, your kids, and your neighbors to do the same. Be critical of what you hear, what you think, and what you see in the media. And help your friends, your kids, and your neighbors to do the same. Respect your body and respect everybody. And help your friends, your kids, and your neighbors to do the same. I have a chorus here. Finally, I'm challenging you right away to ban fat talk in your home and with your kids, your friends, and your neighbors, and so on. So what to do about fat talk? Because people say, okay, well, so if somebody says, how do I look, what do I do? You have options. You could agree, yeah, you're right, you look really fat in that. You could lose a few pounds. Disagree. You're not fat, or you're not that fat. Reassure. One cupcake won't make a difference. Go for it. Friendly advice. You can always go for a run after that cupcake. Hey, I'll go with you. But there's also silence and change the subject. That's fine. You know, just move on. It's an excellent start if you're a beginner. But after today, I'm challenging you to take one step further. Let people know how damaging fat talk is and engage them in a conversation like I've done with you today. Thank you.
Maybe I could ask a few questions to move along what you've talked about up to now. So, why do you think that society has put so much pressure, has put so much into not only the industry, but the pressure we put on our girls and our women in society?
Well, women are great consumers. And both the body image industry, the weight loss industry, the appearance industry makes tons of money from effective advertising. If you create a sense that there's something wrong with you, and then that maybe by buying my product, it's going to solve it, you're going to sell the product. If you Google most of these sites, you'll see on the byline what ads are there. And more often than not, you have ads trying to sell you things to improve the way you look. But in order to feel like you need to improve the way you look, you have to feel like the way you look isn't good enough. Right. So I think the cosmetic industry is about $55 billion a year. So they make a lot of money out of our body image dissatisfaction.
Creating insecurities is a good business.
Adolescent girls spend a lot of money. You know, they're a very good audience for those kinds of advertising strategies.
And above and beyond the industry, do you have a sense that women, as much as men, are putting pressure on women?
Typically, it's women who are more at fault than men. Actually, I have to admit that when I did a lot of Googling for this talk, obviously, even though I couldn't bring any images. And I tried to look up like the 10 most beautiful women. So I ended up on a website called Men's Health. And I assure you, their 10 most beautiful women were quite voluptuous, some of them. They have better taste. Well, if you look at, you know, the 10 top models, there you're talking about something totally different.
Yeah. Yeah. And are you seeing any trends? You know, we've talked a lot about the women and how it's very much related to women's issues. But are you seeing any trends in increased men's issues around body dissatisfaction? And maybe even youth? Younger men?
I think there's a lot happening in that arena, and I'm afraid, guys, you're catching up. Again, if we look at it from a consumer's perspective, if you target men and get them to be unsatisfied, they'll spend money. They'll spend money on weight reduction, they'll spend money on bulking up. So for men, it's not the thin ideal, it's the bulk ideal. It's the strong, muscular, ripples, six-pack look that's in. That sells protein shakes, that sells all kinds of things, and even now they're marketing cosmetics to men. So there's money to be made in making people dissatisfied with themselves. And men are the next targets. The other thing is when it comes to the obesity epidemic, little boys are just as much a target as girls. The obesity epidemic in the States right now, as it's called, you know, it has no gender bias. And so now they're going after the little boys and having them feel like they should do something about themselves.
Speaking of little boys and little girls, are we also seeing trends towards younger and younger kids internalizing these types of body dissatisfaction? I say this because I see my nephews and nieces starting to, you know, look and turn around. It's like, oh my God, not already.
Yeah, and unfortunately, not only that, we're seeing younger and younger kids developing eating disorders at a young age, because a child who's vulnerable and is exposed to the scare tactics that I mentioned, you know, be careful, you're going to become fat. And this is a message that's going around, and a young child cannot process it. They don't even know what fat is. They don't even know what a diet is, and they're already talking about it. This is kind of worrisome when you see young children sort of adopting these ideas that they have to lose weight, or they have to be careful, or they'll become fat. And one of the things we have now that we didn't used to have is direct to children advertising. I mean, how many kids you know, like at 7 around, are walking around with their smartphones and go on the web? You might try to block them from certain sites, but you're not going to block them from just being exposed to these advertisements to lose weight and to be careful. So they can market to kids directly. And fashion too. Right. And so now there's no filter through parents like there used to be. And that's puts kids more at risk and more exposed.
And the peer pressure is increasing too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's, we talk about also sexualization as part of it. As you see younger and younger children looking in a not age appropriate way, dressing in ways that don't correspond to their age group.
So that also has a big influence. Let me switch gears here a little bit and come back to the issue you touched upon, which is around how dieting actually causes or increases the risk of obesity.
Good pickup. I dropped a lot of hints because I thought, let's see whether people can figure it out, or I'm going to have to explain it. Well, it is actually a well-known fact, highly researched, that first of all, dieting doesn't work. The majority of people who diet end up gaining weight, because every time you go on a diet, eventually you go off your diet, and that's the majority, and then you always go up a little. So actually the yo-yo dieting is actually a line going up. Why is this? Well, first of all, I mentioned as well that it's very hard to lose weight. That's because we all have a set point. A weight that belongs to us, that if we just eat normally, follow our hunger pains and our instincts, we will maintain. Because if you exercise more, you might be hungrier. If you eat too much, you might be a little less hungry the next day. So in a natural process, our body regulates itself. When you diet, you're forcing your body into an unnatural mode. Take this scenario, which I like. Get up in the morning, the first day of my new diet. So I'll have a black coffee and half a toast. And then I'll have one of those 100-calorie things they sell, and a 0% yogurt for lunch. And I'm doing a great job, a few carrots in the afternoon, a light supper. And then I sit down in front of TV, and one of two things can happen. I'm starving and unhappy, and all goes well. Or I see that... I see that advertisement for the double burger, with the bacon and cheese, and
the oozing stuff.
I go back into the kitchen and finish the box of 100-calorie things and hit the chips after, right? So it's very hard, first of all, to maintain the resolve because we're fighting nature. And when you actually succeed for a week or two or a month to keep your weight down through unnatural tactics, your brain goes on starvation mode. It's like, what are you doing to me? So next time I go and start to eat normally, it like wants to store a little bit for the next time you pull a number like that.
Very nice scenario of morning breakfast.
So eat your breakfast tomorrow morning.
Yes, we heard. So what makes adolescents be sort of the most at-risk group?
Especially adolescent girls.
Especially adolescent girls.
So adolescence involves many changes at many levels. We'll start by the hormones, which I believe one of my colleagues will be talking about in 2 weeks. Yes. I don't want to steal the show. But it's clear that adolescence is accompanied by a change in body weight and shape. You develop female characteristics. You develop curves. It's also a time of emotional instability. Those hormones will do a number. It's a time when you have to develop your own identity, and a time where peer pressure is extremely important, where what your friends think matters way more than what your mother thinks. And there is a pressure to fit in, to look good, to be socially desirable, to be sexually desirable. And again, if that collides with the thin ideal, which is this is what I should look like and this is not what I look like, it actually has a very negative impact, and the girls will be much more vulnerable to try to do things to change that. And there will be a lot of peer pressure to do that.
And are you seeing some of these phenomenon with older women when there's the other change, hormonal change? And I don't want to steal Dr. Walker's...
Dominique is going to be very angry at me if I give
we'll
her
talk
talk.
about something else.
No, but I think it's a great question, in case she doesn't address it. So actually, the other issue, I mentioned quickly the thin ideal and about like being young looking. Mm-hmm. So nowadays, 60 is really young, which is a good thing for some of us. But the truth is, as women get older, they want to fight that too. Yeah. And that again involves trying to be something that you're not, trying to fight nature. And that puts women at risk of developing unhealthy behaviors, including eating disorders. Yeah.
Maybe I can finish with somebody who had a quote, actually, to say for everybody tonight. So I'll read it out loud. Allow me to share this quote with the audience. A woman looks at herself in the mirror and sees a few wrinkles, extra pounds, a nose too big, a butt too big, something else too big. And she says to the mirror, I don't like what I see in the mirror, but I love what I see inside. So this is the quote for somebody here. So an inspiring person.
Thank you.